Have you ever felt like your emotions are running the show? That moment when stress tightens its grip, your thoughts spiral, and the world feels like it's moving too fast to keep up. You're not alone. In a world that never slows down, emotional overwhelm has become the silent epidemic of modern life. But here's the good news: this isn't a new problem. 2,000 years ago, the Stoics were already crafting a roadmap to navigate the chaos of the human mind. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, put it simply: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the heart of Stoicism: not suppressing emotions, but mastering them. And today, we're going to explore how 35 mental habits, rooted in this ancient philosophy, can turn that overwhelm into focused peace. Think about the last time you faced a situation that felt beyond your control. Maybe it was a looming deadline, a heated argument, or just the weight of everyday responsibilities piling up. What if you could meet those moments not with panic, but with clarity? Stoicism teaches us that the key isn't changing the world around us, it's changing how we respond to it. This isn't about wishful thinking or passive acceptance. It's about training your mind to see challenges as opportunities, to reframe setbacks as lessons, and to cultivate a calm that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. Imagine waking up each day with that kind of mental armor. That's what these habits offer. So why 35? Because transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's the small, daily practices: the way you start your morning, how you react to criticism, even how you reflect before bed, that reshape your relationship with your emotions. Over the course of this video, we'll unpack these habits one by one, giving you practical tools to build resilience, focus, and a deeper sense of peace. Whether you're new to Stoicism or already familiar with its wisdom, there's something here for you. This isn't just philosophy, it's a way of living. And by the end, you'll have a toolkit to face life's storms not as a victim, but as someone who remains steady, no matter what comes your way. Ready to begin? Let's dive in. What if your stress stems from confusing what you can control with what you can't? That's the question Epictetus, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, asked his students 2,000 years ago, and it's just as relevant today. He called it the dichotomy of control, a simple but profound idea. Some things are up to us, like our actions, judgments, and reactions. Everything else, other people's opinions, the weather, traffic, the past, isn't. Yet how often do we waste energy raging against things we'll never change? Seneca put it bluntly: we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. When we obsess over uncontrollable outcomes, we hand our peace of mind over to the world's chaos. Take something as ordinary as a traffic jam. You didn't cause it, you can't magically clear it, and honking won't make the cars ahead move faster. But here's the twist: you can control how you respond. Maybe you use the time to listen to an audiobook, reflect on your day, or practice patience. That shift from frustration to focus is Stoicism in action. It's not about pretending the delay doesn't matter. It's about redirecting your energy toward what does matter, your mindset. Now, think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Was it because of something outside your control, a rude comment, a cancelled flight, a sudden change in plans, or was it your reaction that magnified the stress? This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about empowerment. Every time you catch yourself fixating on the uncontrollable, you have a choice: spiral into anxiety or ask, what part of this is truly mine to influence? That question alone can dissolve half your emotional turbulence. The Stoics weren't suggesting we become indifferent to life's ups and downs. They were teaching us to invest our energy wisely. because peace isn't found in a perfect world, but in mastering where we place our attention. Stoics didn't avoid fear, they rehearsed it. That's the essence of Premeditatio Malorum, Latin for the premeditation of evils. Far from being pessimistic, this practice is about stripping the unknown of its power. Picture a musician practicing scales before a performance or an athlete visualizing their routine. Stoics applied the same principle to life's hardships. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet sudden and unexpected attacks." By mentally walking through potential challenges, you inoculate yourself against panic when they actually happen. Take a difficult conversation you've been dreading, asking for a raise, addressing a conflict, or delivering bad news. If you avoid thinking about it, the dread grows. But if you sit with it beforehand, imagining the worst-case scenario and your calm response, something shifts. The edge of anxiety dulls. You've already lived through it in your mind, so when the moment arrives, you're not caught off guard. This isn't about expecting disaster, it's about removing the element of surprise. Seneca put it this way: "The person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Consider how firefighters train. They don't wait for the blaze to figure out their moves, they drill relentlessly. So when chaos erupts, their actions are almost automatic. Premeditatio malorum is your mental fire drill. It's asking yourself, what if my project fails? What if the flight gets cancelled? What if they say no? Not to dwell on misery, but to rehearse your resilience. When you do this, you'll notice something surprising. Most worst-case scenarios are survivable. Often, there are even opportunities in disguise. So here's a challenge. What's one future obstacle you can mentally rehearse this week? Maybe it's a high-stakes meeting, a tough family discussion, or even just the possibility of a rainy day ruining your plans. Play it out in your mind, not to feed fear, but to disarm it. See yourself responding with patience, adaptability, or even humor. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop resisting the idea of adversity, you start seeing it as just another part of the journey. And suddenly, what once felt overwhelming becomes something you're prepared to meet head-on. How you start your morning sets the tone for everything that follows. Marcus Aurelius knew this. That's why he began each day with ink and parchment, writing reminders to himself before the sun even rose. When you wake up in the morning, he wrote, "Tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Not exactly sunshine and rainbows, right? But here's the genius. He wasn't being cynical. He was preparing his mind to meet the world as it actually was, not as he wished it to be. That journaling habit wasn't about venting. It was a mental gym where he exercised clarity before facing the day's chaos. Imagine if your mornings weren't a frantic scramble, but a deliberate ritual. No reaching for your phone, no drowning in notifications before your feet even hit the floor. Instead, you take 5 minutes to ask yourself, what's within my control today? What virtues do I want to embody? That's the Stoic difference. It's not about adding another task to your to-do list. It's about creating space to align your thoughts before the world pulls you in a dozen directions. Marcus famously wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Morning intentionality is how you reclaim that power. Here's a challenge. Try his method for just 3 days. Grab a notebook and write one sentence, not a novel, just a single line that anchors you. Maybe it's today, I choose patience, or I'll focus only on what I can influence. The content doesn't matter as much as the act itself. You're not just writing words, you're programming your mindset like a philosopher king. And when the first crisis of the day hits, a missed train, a snippy email, you'll notice something shifts. Instead of reacting on autopilot, you pause. That morning ritual becomes a touchstone, a reminder that you've already decided how you want to show up. So what's one small, mindful action you could weave into your morning? It doesn't have to be grand. Maybe it's savoring your coffee without distractions, taking 3 deep breaths before checking your phone, or jotting down one intention like Marcus did. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence, because when you start the day with purpose, you don't just have a morning, you own it. What if losing something made you appreciate it? That's the paradox at the heart of negative visualization, a Stoic practice that flips gratitude on its head. While modern self-help tells us to count our blessings, the Stoics took it further. Imagine those blessings gone. Seneca captured this perfectly. Enjoy what you possess as if you were destined one day to lose it. At first glance, that might sound morbid. Why dwell on loss? But here's the revelation. By mentally rehearsing the absence of what we love, we wake up to its true value while we still have it. Think about your health. Most days, you don't notice it until a fever pins you to bed or a sprained ankle slows you down. Suddenly, walking pain-free feels like a miracle. Negative visualization shortcuts that epiphany. It's the deliberate act of pausing mid-stride to ask, what if I couldn't do this anymore? Not to invite fear, but to ignite appreciation. The Stoics weren't pessimists, they were realists. They knew that taking things for granted is human nature, and that the antidote isn't just gratitude, but conscious contrast. Consider your morning coffee. Routine makes it mundane. Now imagine waking up to find coffee beans no longer existed. That first sip tomorrow would taste like liquid gold. This practice isn't about inventing catastrophes. It's about breaking the trance of familiarity. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself that even his children were on loan from fate. Did that make him love them less? No, it made him cherish them more deeply while he could. So here's a challenge. Pick one ordinary joy you'd miss if it vanished: your partner's laugh, the view from your window, the ability to call a friend. Close your eyes and picture life without it for 10 seconds. When you open them, notice how the colors seem brighter, the weight of presence heavier. That's negative visualization at work, not stealing joy but sharpening it. Because the Stoics understood a truth we often forget: gratitude grows tallest in the soil of impermanence. Now ask yourself, what have I been overlooking lately? The answer is probably hiding in plain sight. The quiet hum of your refrigerator, the dog curled at your feet, the fact that you woke up today with a body that moves and a mind that dreams. These aren't small things, they're everything, and the quicker we see them that way, the richer life becomes. Your problems are smaller than you think. That's the liberating truth behind the Stoic exercise known as the view from above. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, your knuckles white on the steering wheel. Now imagine pulling the camera back, way back, until your car is just a speck on a ribbon of road. Your city a tiny grid, the planet itself a pale blue dot floating in the cosmos. Suddenly, that meeting doesn't feel so life or death, does it? Marcus Aurelius practiced this mental zoom out daily. He wrote, "Think of the substance of the whole, the rocks, the dust, the rivers, and the vastness of time from which you've been carved and into which you'll soon return." This wasn't nihilism, it was clarity. By confronting life's brevity and earth scale, he dissolved petty anxieties like sugar in hot tea. Take workplace stress. That tense email chain, the passive-aggressive colleague, the project hanging over your head. It all feels monumental in the moment, but from the cosmic view. Those office dramas are as fleeting as ripples in a pond. The Stoics weren't dismissing real challenges, they were putting them in perspective. Imagine your current worry etched onto a grain of sand, then dropped onto a beach stretching for miles. That's the power of this practice. It doesn't erase problems, but it reveals their true size. Here's the twist. This perspective isn't just about shrinking your struggles, it's about expanding your gratitude. When you see your life as a brief, bright spark in the grand timeline, ordinary moments glow brighter. The taste of your morning coffee, the sound of laughter, the warmth of sunlight through a window, these aren't small things. They're the whole point. The view from above isn't a cold, detached exercise. It's a wake-up call to savor what matters. So try this. Next time stress starts to spiral, pause and zoom out. Picture your street from space, your lifetime against millennia, your worries as specks in the universe's canvas. Ask yourself, how much will this matter in a week? A year, a century? You'll often find the answer is not at all. That's not discouraging, it's freeing. Because when you stop sweating the small stuff, you create room to fully live the big stuff: love, growth, joy. The Stoics knew this secret. The wider your lens, the lighter your load. And in that lightness, you'll find not just peace, but the space to focus on what truly deserves your energy. Why did Stoics swear by ink and parchment? Because they understood something profound. Writing isn't just recording thoughts. It's wrestling them onto the page where you can see them clearly. Epictetus taught his students to examine impressions as they come, to catch emotions before they harden into reactions. That's what journaling was for them, not a diary of events, but a mental sieve to separate what matters from what doesn't. Imagine your mind as a crowded room where every passing thought shouts for attention. Writing is the act of escorting each one to the door, asking, does this deserve to stay? Take a tough day, maybe a criticism stung or a plan fell apart. Left unexamined, those moments fester, but when you debrief them on paper, something shifts. You're no longer in the emotion, you're observing it. Seneca did this nightly, revisiting his day with brutal honesty. Where did I react poorly? Where did fear masquerade as certainty? This wasn't self-punishment, it was refinement. Like a blacksmith cooling hot metal to shape it, writing gives you the distance to hammer raw feelings into wisdom. Here's the magic: when you articulate chaos, you domesticate it. A vague sense of frustration becomes, I'm angry because X, but what's really beneath that is Y. Suddenly, the monster under the bed has edges you can measure. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, the most famous Stoic journal, wasn't written for publication. It was his private workshop where he forged clarity from confusion, one sentence at a time. Throw out your conceited opinions, he wrote, and you'll stop being jerked around. That's the power of ink. It exposes the conceits we don't even realize we're carrying. So tonight, try this. Before bed, open a notebook and ask one question: what emotion needs unpacking? Maybe it's the irritation when your partner interrupted you, or the anxiety humming behind your productivity. Don't just name it, interrogate it. Why did it surface? What story are you telling yourself? You'll often find the emotion is tied to an assumption: they don't respect me, I'm falling behind, that crumbles under scrutiny. The Stoics didn't journal to dwell, they journaled to disarm, and in that disarmament they found something rare, a mind unshaken by its own storms. What if every obstacle wasn't just something to endure, but something to love? That's the radical heart of Amor Fati, the Stoic art of embracing fate. The phrase, Latin for love of fate, sounds poetic until life hands you a setback that makes your stomach drop. But here's the secret the Stoics knew: the moment you stop resisting what happens to you and start working with what happens for you, everything changes. Friedrich Nietzsche, who borrowed this idea from the Stoics, put it best: my formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not resignation, celebration. Imagine losing a job you thought defined you. The initial blow feels like the world's collapsing. But what if that rejection was the universe nudging you toward a path you'd never have chosen willingly? Maybe it forces you to freelance, launching a business you'd only daydreamed about, or it frees you to move cities where you meet someone who changes your life. The Stoics didn't see setbacks as detours, they saw them as the actual path. Epictetus, born a slave, could have raged against his circumstances. Instead, he taught that obstacles become stepping stones the moment we stop labeling them bad. Here's the twist: Amor Fati isn't about pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about trusting the process enough to say, even this has purpose. Think of a blacksmith's forge. The fire that burns is the same force that tempers steel. Your toughest moments work the same way. When a project fails, it's data. When a relationship ends, it's clarity. When plans crumble, it's space for something unexpected. The Stoics weren't passive, they were alchemists turning leaden disappointments into golden wisdom. So take a recent disaster, a missed opportunity, a harsh critique, a plan gone sideways. Now ask, how could this be secretly working for me? Maybe that rejection saved you from a toxic environment. Maybe the delay taught you patience you'll need later. Amor Fati is the mental muscle that lets you stop asking why me and start asking what now, because fate isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And when you finally see that, even the steepest climbs start to feel like part of the view. That split second between what happens and how you respond, that's where your power lies. Epictetus nailed it when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But here's the catch: reacting is easy. It's automatic, like a door slamming shut. Responding, that takes space. Think of the last time someone cut you off in traffic. Your pulse spiked, your hands tightened on the wheel, maybe a few choice words flew out. But what if, in that exact moment, you'd taken just 3 breaths, not to excuse the other driver, but to reclaim your own calm? That's the Stoic pause in action. It's the mental equivalent of stepping back from a boiling pot before deciding whether to stir it or turn down the heat. Consider a heated work email. The words hit your inbox like a slap, and your fingers itch to fire back. But here's where the magic happens: the pause. Maybe it's counting to 10, maybe it's closing your laptop and walking around the block. That tiny gap is where you shift from being hijacked by emotion to steering with intention. Seneca called this the discipline of assent, the practice of withholding judgment long enough to ask, is this truly worth my energy? Because anger, offense, even excitement, they're all terrible decision makers when given the wheel. Now imagine applying this to smaller moments too. Your kid spills juice on the couch. Your Wi-Fi cuts out mid-meeting. The pause isn't about suppressing frustration. It's about creating just enough daylight between the event and your reaction to choose who you want to be in that moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That calm isn't passive, it's the space where your best self gets a say. So here's your challenge. Pick one recurring trigger today: a coworker's tone, a household mess, a slow-moving line, and insert a deliberate pause. Breathe twice before speaking. Put your phone down before replying. Even silence can be a response when it's chosen instead of defaulted to. The Stoics didn't preach patience because they were saints. They practiced it because they knew this truth: between stimulus and response, there's a doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is the version of you that isn't ruled by circumstance. Why did Seneca sleep on the floor when he could afford the finest bed in Rome? The same reason he practiced poverty despite his wealth: to remind himself that comfort is a choice, not a necessity. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the while, Is this the condition that I feared? This wasn't self-punishment, it was mental armor. The Stoics called it voluntary discomfort, and it's one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful tools for building resilience. By willingly stepping into small hardships, you prove to yourself that what feels like survival mode is often just life without the extras you've grown attached to. Think of it like muscle memory for your mind. When you voluntarily take cold showers, skip a meal, or walk instead of drive, you're not just saving money or time, you're rehearsing for life's inevitable curveballs. Seneca warned that luxury weakens the mind because it convinces us we need things we merely want. But when you periodically strip those comforts away, you rediscover something profound. You're tougher than your routines. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, would dress in rough clothing and sleep on a camp bed during military campaigns, not because he had to, but because he refused to let privilege make him fragile. Here's the key: voluntary discomfort isn't about suffering for its own sake. It's about breaking the illusion that ease equals happiness. When you choose to sit with minor discomfort, a chilly room, a silent phone, a basic meal, you rewire your relationship with adversity. Suddenly, a cancelled flight becomes an exercise in patience rather than a crisis. A power outage turns into a chance to unplug. The Stoics weren't advocating austerity, they were teaching immunity, the kind that comes from knowing you can thrive with less. So ask yourself, what comfort could you temporarily give up this week? Maybe it's sleeping without a pillow one night, turning off notifications for an afternoon, or taking the stairs instead of the elevator. The goal isn't to make life harder, but to remind yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances. Because when you voluntarily face small discomforts, the big ones lose their power to shake you. And that's the real luxury, not a life without challenges, but the unshakable confidence that you can meet them. How would you move through today if you knew it was your last? That question isn't meant to morbid, it's meant to clarify. The Stoics called this practice Memento Mori, a deliberate remembrance that life is fleeting. Marcus Aurelius scribbled it in his journal like a mantra. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. At first glance, that might sound dark, but here's the paradox. Confronting mortality doesn't shrink your life, it sharpens it. When you stop pretending you have unlimited time, you start spending your hours like currency, investing them only in what truly matters. Think about the last petty argument you had. Maybe it was over whose turn it was to take out the trash or a snide comment that lingered too long. Now imagine knowing you'd never see that person again. Would the trash still feel worth fighting about? Memento Mori isn't about dwelling on endings, it's about editing out the noise. The Romans kept skulls on their desks as physical reminders. You don't need something that dramatic, but the principle stands: death is the ultimate filter. When viewed through its lens, grudges seem wasteful, distractions feel costly, and procrastination becomes absurd. Consider how differently you'd approach a work presentation if it were your final chance to speak. You'd cut the fluff, focus on what's essential, and maybe even dare to say what you've always held back. That's the power of this practice. It strips away pretense. Seneca wrote letters as if they might be his last, which is why they're still read 2,000 years later. He wasn't being melodramatic, he was being alive. Because here's the secret: you don't need a terminal diagnosis to start living with urgency. You just need the courage to ask, if this were it, would I be proud of how I spent today? So here's your challenge. Pick one routine moment this week, your commute, a meal, a conversation, and pause to infuse it with the weight of Memento Mori. How would you savor that coffee if it were your final cup? What would you say to your partner if words were running out? You'll notice something shifts. The trivial falls away, and what's left is startlingly simple. presence, connection, the unshakable certainty that you're here fully while you still can. The Stoics didn't reflect on death to frighten themselves. They did it to wake themselves up, and in that awakening they found the only thing that ever really mattered, the art of living. What if your anger wasn't yours, not in the sense of denying responsibility, but in the liberating act of seeing it as a temporary weather pattern passing through your mind rather than the whole sky? The Stoics called this cognitive distancing, the art of stepping back from emotions to observe them with the cool detachment of a scientist studying a specimen. Epictetus laid the groundwork. Men are disturbed not by things but by the views they take of them. In other words, the event itself is neutral. It's the story we wrap around it that stings. Here's how it works. When frustration bubbles up during a traffic jam, instead of thinking I'm angry, try there is anger happening. That tiny shift in language creates space between you and the emotion. It's the difference between standing in a storm and watching it from a window. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, referring to his own irritations as smoke and dust, visible but insubstantial. Anxiety, resentment, even excitement, when you name them as passing phenomena rather than personal truths, they lose their grip. Picture anxiety as a cloud. You wouldn't yell at a cloud for blocking the sun or beg it to disappear. You'd acknowledge it, wait, and trust it'll move on. Emotions work the same way. The moment you label one objectively, this is a surge of panic about my presentation instead of I'm a nervous wreck, you activate the rational part of your brain. Neuroscience backs this up. Simply naming an emotion reduces its intensity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they knew this truth instinctively. What you observe, you can master. So here's your challenge. Pick one emotion you felt today, maybe impatience in a long line or jealousy scrolling social media. Now give it a neutral label, like a botanist naming a plant. That's a reaction to perceived unfairness, or that's comparison discomfort. Notice how it feels lighter when you hold it at arm's length. Epictetus wasn't asking you to become emotionless. He was teaching you to stop fusing with your emotions, to see them as visitors, not residents. And when you do, you'll discover something astonishing. You're not the storm. You're the sky, always wider, always clearer than whatever passes through. Ever hit a wall that became a door? That's the essence of the obstacle is the way, a modern Stoic principle popularized by Ryan Holiday, but its roots stretch back to Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. At first glance, it sounds like a motivational poster, but dig deeper, and you'll find one of Stoicism's most practical tools, the art of alchemy. Not the kind that turns lead into gold, but the kind that transforms setbacks into setups, roadblocks into stepping stones. Take a failed project, maybe a business idea that flopped or a creative endeavor that crashed. In the moment, it feels like a dead end, but what if that failure was secretly a curriculum? The late nights troubleshooting taught you patience. The rejection letters thickened your skin. The pivot you were forced to make led you to an opportunity you'd never have seen otherwise. The Stoics didn't just tolerate obstacles, they leveraged them. Epictetus, who was crippled as a slave, didn't waste energy wishing for strong legs. He built an unshakable mind instead. His weakness became his strength because he refused to let it be anything else. Consider the story of Thomas Edison's lab burning down. As flames consumed years of work, he told his son, "Go get your mother. She'll never see a fire like this again." Then he rebuilt, discovering improvements in the process. That's the obstacle is the way in action, not denying the fire, but using its light to see further. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, war, and plague, yet he wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." Your obstacles aren't exceptions to your path, they're part of the path. So here's your challenge. What's one current hurdle, a rejection, a limitation, a delay that you can stop fighting and start using? Maybe that frustrating coworker is teaching you diplomacy. The tight budget is forcing creativity. The loneliness is clarifying who truly matters. Obstacles don't block the way, they are the way. And the moment you stop resisting them, you start riding their momentum. The wall was never there to stop you. It was there to show you how badly you wanted what's on the other side. What does it mean to be rich? Seneca had a brutal answer. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. The Stoics practiced contemptus externorum, contempt for external goods, not because they hated nice things, but because they recognized a dangerous illusion. The more we own, the more our possessions own us. Think about the last time you stressed over a scratch on your new phone or lost sleep over a stock dip. That's the trap, when maintenance costs, literal or emotional, start outweighing the joy. The ancient Stoics weren't minimalists by default. They were freedom fighters who refused to let their happiness be held hostage by objects. Take modern downsizing movements. People who purge half their closets often report feeling lighter, not deprived. It's not the lack of stuff that liberates them, it's the lack of dependency. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly ate cheap meals, wore plain clothes, and slept on hard beds to remind himself, "I'm not defined by what surrounds me." He called wealth a master whose house you live in, comfortable but never truly yours. The moment you believe your things make you valuable, you've handed them the keys to your self-worth. Here's the litmus test. If your home burned down tonight, what would you genuinely mourn? Photos, heirlooms, the rest is just friction. The knickknacks that demand dusting, the gadgets that need updating, the clothes that clutter choices. The Stoics didn't advocate poverty, they championed detachment. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote, "When you've done well for others and accepted what's given, what more could you want?" His luxury wasn't in palaces, but in the freedom to walk away from them without regret. So try this. Pick one luxury you consider essential: your car, your smartphone, your daily latte. Now imagine living without it for a month, not as punishment but as an experiment in self-sufficiency. You might discover, as Seneca did, that what feels like necessity is often just habit in fancy dress. Because true wealth isn't about having everything you want, it's about wanting less of what you don't need. And in that wanting less, you'll find something priceless, the unshakable knowledge that you're enough, with or without the extras. When did you last sit in total silence? Not the background hum of a podcast or the flicker of a screen, just you and the quiet. The Stoics considered silence not as emptiness, but as fertile ground where clarity grows. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Give yourself a gift, the present moment. Retreat to this inner stillness often." He wasn't talking about meditation in the modern sense. He meant something simpler yet radical, creating space to hear your own thoughts above life's noise. Think of your mind as a snow globe. Every notification, conversation, and distraction shakes it up, leaving the flakes swirling in chaos. Silence is what lets them settle. Take Seneca's habit of ending each day with a quiet review, no writing, no talking, just sitting with his experiences like a chef tasting a dish before adjusting the seasoning. That's the power of stillness. It turns reactions into reflections. Here's a challenge. Try a no-media morning. Wake up and resist the pull of your phone, the news, even music. For those first 30 minutes, let there be nothing but the sound of your breath, the creak of floorboards, the birds outside your window. You'll notice something unexpected. The thoughts you've been avoiding rise to the surface. The unresolved argument, the creative idea you brushed aside, the gut feeling about a decision. silence doesn't create wisdom, it uncovers what was already there. Marcus called this listening to the inner divinity, that quiet voice drowned out by daily chatter. He didn't wait for a mountain retreat to practice. He carved pockets of stillness between battles and rulings. Imagine the leader of an empire insisting on moments of nothingness, not because he had time to spare, but because he couldn't afford not to. So where can you add 5 minutes of silence today? Maybe it's shutting the car door and sitting before turning the key, or stepping outside after dinner to watch the sky darken without scrolling. The goal isn't to empty your mind, but to meet it. Because in that stillness, you'll find what the Stoics knew all along. The answers were never in the noise. They were waiting for you to pause long enough to hear them. Who do you want to be when the pressure mounts? Not in theory, but in that raw moment when your heart races and your patience thins. That's when your virtues either shine or crumble. Epictetus put it bluntly, first decide who you would be, then do what you must do. This isn't about lofty ideals, it's about wiring your values into your nervous system so they kick in automatically when chaos strikes. Think of virtues as mental shortcuts, pre-programmed responses that override panic with purpose. Take patience. You might admire it in others, but have you defined what it looks like for you? Is it counting to 5 before responding to a provocation? Is it refusing to multitask when someone speaks, even if you're itching to interrupt? Virtues aren't abstract, they're lived choices. Marcus Aurelius didn't just think about justice. He etched it into his daily rulings as emperor, often siding with the powerless against Rome's elite. His virtue wasn't a philosophy, it was muscle memory. Here's the twist: stress doesn't create character, it reveals it. When you're cut off in traffic, your true virtue isn't the deep breath you wish you'd take, and it's the curse that actually slipped out. That's why the Stoics practiced virtue mapping, naming their core principles and the specific behaviors that embodied them. For Seneca, integrity meant turning down bribes even when the entire Senate was corrupt. For you, it might mean admitting a mistake at work when no one would notice if you stayed silent. So ask yourself, what's one non-negotiable value when the heat is on? Maybe it's courage, not the absence of fear, but the commitment to speak up when it's easier to stay quiet. Maybe it's compassion, especially toward that coworker who grates on your nerves. Write it down, then drill it into the granular. If I value patience, I will pause for 3 seconds before answering when frustrated. The power isn't in the ideal, it's in the instruction manual you give yourself for living it. Because when you pre-decide who you'll be under fire, stress doesn't dictate your actions, your principles do, and that's where real peace begins. What if peace comes not from adding, but from subtracting? Seneca saw through the illusion 2,000 years ago. Being busy is a kind of laziness, lazy thinking that indiscriminately fills time with motion rather than meaning. We wear packed schedules like badges of honor, mistaking movement for progress, but the Stoics knew better. True freedom isn't found in doing more, it's found in undoing. Consider your to-do list. How many items are truly yours, not obligations inherited from others' expectations, not shoulds absorbed from social media, but choices that align with your deepest values? Every yes to something trivial is a no to something vital. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire yet guarded his time like a miser, writing, "If you seek tranquility, do less." Not nothing, just less of what drains you and more of what fuels you. Take Warren Buffett's strategy for productivity. He told his pilot to list his top 25 career goals, then circle just 5. The other 20, not second-tier priorities, but avoid at all costs distractions. Why? Because scattering focus guarantees mediocrity. The Stoics practiced this ruthless editing with their attention, energy, and even relationships. Seneca turned down dinner invitations from Rome's elite to preserve time for writing and reflection. In an age without smartphones, he still battled attention thieves and won by subtraction. Here's the paradox: doing less isn't about laziness, it's about leverage. When you prune the non-essentials, what remains grows stronger. A vineyard owner doesn't hesitate to cut good branches so the best grapes thrive. Your time deserves the same discernment, so grab your mental shears, look at your calendar and ask, what here is noise masquerading as necessity, that meeting that could be an email? The social event you dread but attend out of guilt, the apps fragmenting your focus. Delete one thing not because it's bad, but because it's stealing space from what's better. The art of subtraction isn't loss, it's making room for the life you've been too busy to live. How are you tied to the universe, not by invisible strings, but by something far more profound, your very existence as part of an interconnected whole? Marcus Aurelius called this sympatheia, the Stoic principle that we're all citizens of a shared world. He wrote, "What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee." At first glance, that might sound poetic, but here's the raw truth it reveals. Your well-being is bound to the well-being of others. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every decision to lift someone up doesn't just help them, it strengthens the fabric you're woven into. Picture this: you're rushing through a crowded subway station when you see a stranger struggling with heavy bags. Stopping to help costs you 2 minutes, but the ripple effect goes further. That person might carry the warmth of your gesture into their next interaction, passing it forward like a quiet torch. This isn't just altruism, it's ecology. Just as trees in a forest share nutrients through hidden fungal networks, humans thrive when they recognize their role in something larger. Epictetus, born into slavery, taught that we're all limbs of a single body. Hurt the foot, and the hand rushes to help without debating whether it's worth the effort. Now consider the opposite: the times you've cut someone off in traffic or brushed past a cashier without eye contact. Those moments might feel insignificant, but they're fractures in sympatheia. The Stoics didn't preach interconnectedness to sound noble, they practiced it as a survival strategy. A society where everyone acts only for themselves is like an orchestra playing out of sync. No matter how skilled the musicians, the result is noise. Here's the challenge: how can you act more connected today? Maybe it's letting a car merge ahead of you without irritation, or really listening to a coworker's idea instead of waiting for your turn to speak. Marcus Aurelius ruled empires but saw himself as a citizen of the world, accountable to something vaster than borders or titles. You don't need his power to live that truth. Sometimes it's as simple as buying coffee for the person behind you in line, not because they need it, but because you need to remember, separation is an illusion. The universe doesn't have strangers, only parts of yourself you haven't met yet. Every thought that enters your mind comes wearing a disguise. It presents itself as fact when it might just be fiction. Epictetus called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before accepting any impression as truth. His famous challenge was simple yet revolutionary. Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. That moment of hesitation, that's where your power lies. Take the thought, I must be perfect. It marches into your mind wearing a crown, demanding obedience. But what if you stopped it at the gate? What if you asked, says who? Perfection isn't a universal law. It's a story you've inherited, a script you're reciting without checking if the lines fit. The Stoics weren't suggesting you dismiss every thought. They were urging you to interrogate them. Imagine your mind as a courtroom where impressions must present evidence before earning your belief. Here's how it works in practice. You're preparing a presentation, and the thought, if I stumble, they'll think I'm incompetent surfaces. Instead of letting it dictate your anxiety, put it on the stand. Is that true? Have you ever admired a speaker more for their flawless delivery or for their grace in recovering from a mistake? Most truths we accept are just habits in convincing costumes. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." He wasn't policing his thoughts, he was curating them. Now try this. Pick one assumption you've carried today. Maybe my worth depends on my productivity, or if I say no, they'll resent me. Hold it up to the light. Where did it come from? Does it hold water under scrutiny? The discipline of assent isn't about doubting everything. It's about refusing to let unexamined beliefs run your life. Because once you start questioning the scripts, you'll find most of them were written by fear, not wisdom, and that's when you reclaim the pen. Why did Stoics avoid applause? Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, wrote these telling words in his private journal. "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." The Stoics weren't against celebration or achievement. They were warriors against a far more insidious enemy, letting external validation become the compass for your worth. Imagine training for years to master a skill, only to measure your progress by the claps of an audience that might cheer just as loudly for the next performer. That's the trap of social validation. It turns you into a puppet, dancing to rhythms you didn't choose. Take social media. Every like, comment, and share delivers a tiny hit of dopamine, convincing us we're valued. But scroll through your feed, and you'll notice something unsettling. The same people praising your post are simultaneously envying someone else's highlight reel. The applause is fickle, the standards constantly shifting. Seneca saw this clearly. What's the point of counting other people's approval if you don't first approve of yourself? He withdrew from public life for years, not out of bitterness, but to recalibrate his inner scorecard. Here's the litmus test. When you imagine achieving your biggest goal, publishing that book, landing that promotion, hitting that fitness milestone, ask yourself, would it still matter if no one noticed? If the answer is no, you might be chasing the wrong prize. The Stoics didn't reject recognition. They simply recognized it as seasoning, not the meal. A standing ovation feels great, but it can't sustain you when the curtains close and you're alone with your thoughts. So consider this. Where does your hand instinctively reach for external validation? Maybe it's refreshing your inbox for praise after sending a work project, or fishing for compliments on a new outfit. There's no shame in enjoying appreciation, but when you need it to feel whole, you've handed others the keys to your self-worth. Marcus had the adoration of an empire, yet he wrote, "Look inward, the source of all good lies within you." That's the Stoic secret. The only applause that truly lasts is the quiet nod you give yourself when no one's watching. And once you hear that, the noise of the crowd becomes background music, pleasant but non-essential. What's your gym for the mind? Just as athletes build strength by lifting weights, we strengthen our resilience by willingly embracing challenges, what the Stoics called voluntary discomfort. Seneca put it bluntly, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. But here's the catch. Most of us spend our lives avoiding discomfort, then wonder why we crumble when real adversity hits. The Stoics flipped this script. They didn't wait for misfortune to find them. They sought out manageable hardships to inoculate themselves against life's inevitable blows. Picture a CEO who takes public transit once a week instead of her private car, or a writer who drafts entire chapters on a typewriter to break his dependency on digital comforts. These aren't acts of self-punishment, they're mental resistance training. When you voluntarily step into small struggles, you rewire your relationship with adversity. The cold shower you force yourself to endure, that's teaching your brain discomfort won't kill me. The difficult conversation you initiate instead of avoiding. That's proof you can survive tension without falling apart. Consider the story of Teddy Roosevelt, who, despite his asthma and frail body as a child, forced himself into brutal physical training. By adulthood, he was boxing in the White House and leading cavalry charges. His motto, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." That's controlled adversity in action, not rejecting comfort but refusing to be enslaved by it. The Stoics knew that luxury weakens us when it becomes a requirement rather than an occasional treat. So here's your challenge. What's one growth-focused struggle you can invite this week? Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier to journal in the dark, or committing to a project that scares you because it might reveal your limitations. The goal isn't to suffer for suffering's sake. It's to prove to yourself that you're more adaptable than your routines suggest. Because when you normalize challenges, you stop seeing them as threats and start recognizing them as the whetstone that sharpens your best self. And that's when you discover the Stoic secret. The obstacle isn't in your way, it is the way. Where does your mind live most of the time? In the wreckage of yesterday or the shadow of tomorrow? Epictetus saw this human tendency 2 millennia ago. We suffer more from imagination than from reality, from anticipation than from actual events. That's the cruel irony. We sacrifice the only moment we ever truly possess, the present, for regrets and worries that may never materialize. The Stoics weren't preaching mindfulness as a buzzword. They were offering it as an antidote to self-inflicted pain. Consider something as simple as eating a meal. How often do you taste the first bite, really taste it, before your thoughts drift to an upcoming meeting or replay an awkward conversation? That automatic pilot mode isn't just distraction, it's a theft of lived experience. Marcus Aurelius called this the poverty of the present, or when we're so busy mourning or fearing other moments that we bankrupt the one we're in. But here's the secret. The present isn't just where life happens, it's where you reclaim your power. Anxiety about the future and rumination about the past are illusions of control. The present is the only place where action exists. Try this experiment. Pick one routine activity today. Brushing your teeth, walking to your car, drinking your afternoon tea, and do it as if it were the most important thing in the world. Feel the bristles against your gums, notice the rhythm of your footsteps, savor the warmth of the cup in your hands. This isn't about Zen detachment, it's about reoccupying your own life. The Stoics practiced this not to escape reality, but to inhabit it fully. When Epictetus said, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish, but wish for everything to happen as it does," he wasn't advocating passivity. He was pointing to the freedom found in meeting the present moment without resistance. So here's your challenge. What's one ordinary act you can perform today with total presence? Maybe it's listening to a friend without mentally drafting your response, or feeling the water on your skin during a shower. Don't aim for perfection, aim for participation. Because when you stop treating the present as a waiting room for some imagined future, you'll discover something startling. You've been standing in the center of your life all along, waiting for yourself to arrive. What if you disarmed conflict before it even began? That's the essence of preemptive kindness, a Stoic practice so counterintuitive yet transformative that Marcus Aurelius called it a joy surpassing all others, loving even those who oppose you. Imagine walking into a tense meeting where you know a colleague has been undermining you, and instead of matching their energy, you open with genuine praise for one of their recent ideas. Watch how the air shifts. This isn't about being naive or ignoring real friction. It's about refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate yours. The Stoics saw kindness not as weakness, but as a strategic choice to reclaim control of the emotional battlefield. Think of it like this: hostility thrives on reciprocity. When someone throws a verbal punch, our instinct is to swing back, creating a cycle where both parties lose. But kindness operates differently. It disrupts the rhythm. Picture a rival who expects your resentment only to receive your respect. Their confusion alone can crack the armor of animosity. Marcus, who faced constant political sabotage as emperor, wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." He didn't mean suppressing anger. He meant transcending it by choosing a response so unexpected it resets the entire interaction. Consider the story of Abraham Lincoln appointing Edwin Stanton, a man who'd publicly called him a long-armed ape, as his Secretary of War. When aides questioned the decision, Lincoln replied, "Because he's the best man for the job." Stanton went on to become one of Lincoln's most loyal allies. This is preemptive kindness in action, not flattery, but the deliberate elevation of principle over pettiness. The Stoics understood that how we treat others says far more about us than about them. Every act of unearned generosity is a silent declaration: I decide who I am. So here's your challenge. Who can you surprise with kindness today? Maybe it's the neighbor who always parks too close, the coworker who takes credit for your ideas, or even the stranger who cuts in line. Don't wait for them to deserve it. That's the trap. Kindness becomes most powerful when it's least expected, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Because in the end, the person you're really freeing isn't them, it's you. What if your greatest fears lost their teeth the moment you stared them down? Seneca played this mental game daily, writing, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, but you might know it as the what-if game. Here's how it works. Instead of running from anxiety, you chase it to its logical conclusion. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Then go deeper, and if that happened, what would I do? This isn't doom-scrolling in your mind, it's stress testing your resilience before life administers the exam. Take financial fear. The thought, what if I lose my job, can spiral into sleepless nights, but play the game. If I lost my income, I'd cut discretionary spending first. Then I'd tap my emergency fund while job hunting. I might need temporary work, but I've survived tough spots before. Suddenly, the monster under the bed has a blueprint for defeat. The Stoics weren't teaching pessimism. They were exposing how rarely our worst-case scenarios match reality. Most fears shrink when forced into daylight. Consider public speaking, the nightmare scenario, forgetting your lines while everyone judges you. Now examine it. If I blank, I'll pause, breathe, and glance at my notes. The audience wants me to succeed. They've all been nervous too. That mental rehearsal strips the horror from the hypothetical. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "The obstacle becomes the way." By confronting imagined disasters, he turned them into navigable terrain rather than bottomless pits. Here's your challenge. What fear have you been avoiding that loses power when examined? Maybe it's what if my relationship ends, or what if this venture fails? Write it down, then follow the thread all the way through. You'll often find two liberating truths. First, the worst case is survivable. Second, you're more resourceful than fear pretends. The what-if game doesn't eliminate life's risks, it proves you're built to handle them, and that changes everything. How often do you tie your self-worth to an outcome you can't fully control? That promotion you're gunning for, the perfect first date, the publisher's approval of your manuscript. We fixate on results as if they're report cards on our value. But Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who transformed slavery into wisdom, offered a radical alternative. make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. In other words, your job isn't to win. Your job is to show up fully, then let life unfold without turning the outcome into a verdict on your worth. Take job interviews. You can research the company, rehearse your answers, and dress the part, but you can't force the hiring manager to pick you. Maybe they already have an internal candidate. Maybe the CEO's nephew wants the role. Obsessing over the result is like a farmer staring at the sky demanding rain instead of tending his crops. The Stoics didn't preach passivity, they preached focus. Pour everything into the effort, then release your grip on what happens next. That's not resignation, it's liberation. Here's where most stumble. We confuse detachment with apathy. Not caring if you get the job would make you a lousy candidate. Caring too much transforms healthy ambition into sleepless nights and desperate energy. The balance: love the work, not the trophy. A chef can't control whether every diner loves her dish, but she can control the quality of ingredients, the precision of the cook, the warmth of the presentation. That's the sweet spot, effort without entanglement. So ask yourself, what's one goal you've been white-knuckling? Maybe it's a fitness target, a creative project, or a relationship milestone. Now shift the metric. Instead of "did I achieve X?" ask, "did I give this my authentic best?" That subtle pivot changes everything. You'll find yourself working harder but stressing less, because your worth is no longer held hostage by outcomes. The irony: that's often when the results start surprising you. Because when you stop needing the world to validate you, you become free to truly excel. And that's when life begins handing you gifts you stopped begging for. Where's your inner sanctuary? That quiet space where the noise of the world fades and you reconnect with what's true. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome amid constant war and political intrigue, wrote about this daily retreat. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He wasn't talking about a physical place, he meant the stillness we carry within us, even in chaos. That's the heart of the Stoic stillness ritual, not escaping life, but anchoring yourself so deeply that external storms can't pull you under. Think of it like this: your mind is a lake. Most days, the winds of deadlines, conflicts, and distractions send ripples across the surface until the water becomes murky. Stillness is what lets the sediment settle so you can see clearly again. Take something as simple as a 3-minute breathing space, eyes closed, attention on each inhale and exhale, letting thoughts pass like clouds. No special equipment, no elaborate routine. Just you, your breath, and the deliberate choice to pause. The Stoics didn't have mindfulness apps. They had the discipline to stop and recalibrate amid the demands of their lives. Here's the challenge: when will you schedule stillness today? Not if you'll find time, but when. Maybe it's before checking your phone in the morning, or in your car after work before walking inside. The timing doesn't matter as much as the commitment. Picture a CEO stepping out of a board meeting to stare at the sky for 60 seconds. That's not wasted time. It's the reset button that keeps decisions sharp and reactions measured. Marcus didn't wait for calm moments to practice stillness. He created them between battles and rulings, proving that tranquility isn't about circumstances, it's about priority. So try this. Set a reminder for one moment today, any moment, where you'll stop and step into your inner sanctuary. No grand meditation required, just a single conscious breath, a release of tension in your shoulders, a fleeting awareness that you're here now. Because stillness isn't something you find, it's something you remember, and the more you visit that quiet place within, the easier it becomes to return when the world tries to drown you out. The Stoics knew this secret. The busier life gets, the more stillness becomes not a luxury but a lifeline. What if "I don't know" isn't a weakness but a superpower? Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who turned his own enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, put it bluntly, "It is impossible to learn what you think you already know." That's the paradox of humility. The moment you admit ignorance, you unlock the door to real growth. Think about the last time you pretended to understand something to avoid looking foolish. Now imagine the alternative, asking that clarifying question, requesting help, saying those three liberating words, "I don't know." Suddenly, the pressure to perform evaporates and actual learning begins. Consider the scientist who publishes a groundbreaking study only to discover an error in her data. She could quietly correct it and hope no one notices, or she could publicly acknowledge the mistake, inviting peers to collaborate on a better solution. The first option preserves ego, the second accelerates progress. That's humility in action, trading the illusion of infallibility for the fertile soil of curiosity. The Stoics didn't see ignorance as shameful, they saw it as the raw material of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial status, wrote, "To accept correction without resentment is the mark of one who is on the path to wisdom." Not perfection progress. Here's where most stumble. We confuse expertise with identity. If you've built your self-worth on being the smart one or the competent one, admitting a gap feels like personal failure. But what if you reframed not knowing as an opportunity to expand? Picture a chef who insists her recipe can't be improved, missing the chance to taste a better version. Now imagine her opposite, the cook who eagerly samples street food in every city, collecting ideas like seashells. Which one grows? So here's your challenge. What subject can you approach this week with a beginner's mind? Maybe it's asking a junior colleague to explain a new tech tool instead of faking familiarity, or admitting to your child that you don't have all the answers, then discovering them together. The Stoics celebrated the beginner's mindset because they knew this truth. Mastery isn't a summit you reach and plant your flag on. It's a horizon that keeps receding as you walk toward it. And the only way to move forward is to first admit you haven't arrived. Your brain is wired to spot what's missing: the unpaid bill, the critical comment, the ache in your lower back while taking the good for granted. The Stoics called this negativity bias, and they fought it with a weapon so simple it's almost subversive: the pause of gratitude. Not the grand once-a-year Thanksgiving kind, but the daily act of stopping mid-stride to ask, what's already enough right now? Seneca, who witnessed Rome's excesses firsthand, wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." He wasn't talking about lavish feasts or triumphs. He meant the quiet moments we overlook in our hunger for the next thing. Take your morning coffee. Most days you drink it on autopilot while scanning headlines or mentally rehearsing your to-do list. But what if, just once today, you held the cup in both hands and really tasted it? Notice the warmth seeping into your palms, the bitter richness on your tongue, the way steam curls toward your face like a living thing. That's gratitude in action, not for the coffee itself, but for your ability to experience it. The Stoics didn't wait for perfect conditions to practice this. They found wonder in the ordinary precisely because life's fragility made it extraordinary. A loaf of bread was a miracle when you considered the earth, rain, and hands that brought it to your table. Here's the twist: gratitude isn't passive appreciation, it's active rebellion. Every time you pause to marvel at the functioning of your lungs or the fact that clean water flows from your tap with a turn of your wrist, you're dismantling the brain's doom-seeking machinery. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to vent complaints but to catalogue small victories. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He wrote those words while leading brutal military campaigns, proving that gratitude isn't dependent on circumstance, it's a lens you choose to see through. So here's your challenge. What's one mundane thing you can marvel at today? Maybe it's the hum of your refrigerator, a sound that would have been unimaginable luxury to most humans in history. Or the way your dog's ears perk up when you say their name, a silent conversation spanning species. Don't wait for the perfect sunset or a promotion to feel thankful. The raw material of joy is already here, hiding in plain sight, because when you train yourself to spot what's working, you'll realize the world has been whispering its gifts to you all along. You just forgot to lean in and listen. What would you tell your best friend if they were standing where you are right now? That's the power of the third-person view, a simple but transformative Stoic exercise that Marcus Aurelius used daily. He'd step outside himself in his journal, writing things like, "Marcus, why are you troubled? Haven't you faced worse?" That shift from I to you creates instant perspective. Suddenly, the problem you're drowning in becomes a challenge you can observe, assess, and even laugh about. The Stoics didn't just preach self-awareness, they practiced self-coaching. Take a mistake you're beating yourself up over. Maybe you snapped at a loved one or botched a presentation. From the inside, it feels like a personal failing. But imagine your wiser self sitting across from you at a cafe. What would they say? "You were tired. You'll apologize and do better next time. This isn't the end of your story." That's not letting yourself off the hook. It's applying the same compassion you'd effortlessly offer others. Epictetus saw this as mental hygiene. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. Sometimes the voice you most need to hear is your own, just from a wiser angle. Here's the magic: distance dissolves drama. A client yelling becomes their bad day, not your worthlessness. A missed deadline transforms from catastrophe to course correction. Marcus wrote, "Look at things as they are, not as your fears paint them." The third-person view is your reality checker, a way to separate facts from the stories we wrap around them. Think of it like watching a movie of your life. Would the audience see a tragedy or a hero figuring things out? So try this tonight. Replay one sticky moment from today, but narrate it as if advising a friend. When your boss criticized your work, you felt defensive, but what if this feedback actually helps you grow? Notice how the emotional charge fades when you're not trapped inside it. The Stoics knew this secret. The wisest version of you already exists. You just need to pull up a chair and let them speak. What thoughts are junk mail in your mind, those mental newsletters you never signed up for but keep scrolling through anyway? Epictetus had a ruthless approach to mental clutter. If a thought doesn't serve your purpose, dismiss it like an uninvited guest. Imagine your mind as a mailbox. Some messages deserve attention plans, creative sparks, genuine concerns. But how much of it is spam? Old grudges collecting dust like expired coupons, hypothetical arguments you rehearse but never send, envy over someone else's highlight reel that plays on loop. The Stoics didn't just organize their outer lives, they practiced mental minimalism, deleting what drained focus without offering value. Take resentment. That coworker who took credit for your idea 3 months ago, how many mental replays have you devoted to that moment? Each rerun costs energy, like an app running in the background of your phone, slowing everything down. The Stoic solution isn't forced forgiveness. It's asking a practical question. Does this thought help me act with wisdom or courage today? If not, drag it to the trash. Marcus Aurelius compared useless thoughts to weeds in a garden. Neglect them, and they'll choke what you're trying to grow. Here's the twist: mental clutter isn't just negative. Even positive fantasies like imagining a promotion you haven't earned or a relationship that doesn't exist can be distractions if they replace real effort. Seneca warned against building castles in the sky, not to crush dreams but to free energy for laying actual bricks. The goal isn't an empty mind, it's a curated one where every thought earns its place by serving your growth or peace. So grab your mental delete key. What's one stale narrative you can clear out today? Maybe it's the "I'll never be good enough" script from an old critic, or the endless comparison to a friend's curated life. Try this. Picture the thought as a physical object, a crumpled paper, a dusty trophy, and toss it into a mental bin. Notice the lightness that follows. The Stoics knew a secret we often forget. A decluttered mind isn't just peaceful, it's powerful, because when you stop carrying what doesn't matter, you've got both hands free to grasp what does. Right now, that email from your boss feels like a 5-alarm fire. The rude comment from a stranger sticks like a burr in your mind. But here's a question that changes everything. Will this still matter in 5 years? Seneca saw through this human tendency 2,000 years ago. We suffer more from illusion than reality, magnifying trivialities until they blot out the sky. The Stoics called this temporal distancing, the practice of pulling back from the heat of the moment to see your life as if from a mountaintop, where petty grievances shrink to insignificance against the vast terrain of your journey. Take criticism. When someone dismisses your work or mocks your idea, it stings. But fast forward 5 years, will you even remember their name? The projects that truly shaped you, the relationships that endured, those are the landmarks that remain. The rest, fading footnotes. This isn't about dismissing your feelings. It's about recognizing which battles are worth your emotional armor. Marcus Aurelius would scribble reminders like, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." That's the long view in action, refusing to let passing storms define your climate. Consider the story of a young entrepreneur who lost her biggest client. At the time, it felt catastrophic until she realized it forced her to pivot toward a niche that later made her fortune. What seemed like a disaster was just a plot twist she couldn't yet read. The Stoics weren't preaching indifference, they were teaching perspective. A setback that consumes your week might barely register in your decade. So here's your challenge. What current stress feels monumental today but might seem minor in hindsight? Maybe it's a social media slight, a missed deadline, or a snub at a party. Try this, write it down, then physically place it in a drawer labeled 5 years from now. When you revisit it months later, you'll often find the ink has faded, not just on the paper, but in your memory. Because time doesn't just heal wounds, it reveals which ones were ever worth bleeding over. And that's the gift of the long view. It doesn't erase life's stings, it just reminds you they're not the whole story. What if curiosity cured anxiety? That's the radical proposition behind the Stoic practice of the beginner's mind, the art of embracing "I don't know" as an opening, not a failure. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled the known world, wrote in his private journal, "To expect the ignorant to know is like expecting the lame to run." At first glance, it sounds harsh, but here's the liberating truth he was pointing to. The moment we stop pretending to have all the answers, we create space for real growth. Anxiety thrives on the illusion of control, while curiosity flourishes in the fertile soil of uncertainty. Think about the last time you tried something truly new, maybe learning a language, painting, or even assembling furniture with unclear instructions. That initial frustration when your hands fumble and your brain strains, that's not incompetence, it's the sacred discomfort of being a beginner again. The Stoics didn't avoid this feeling, they sought it deliberately. Like a muscle that strengthens under resistance, the mind grows when stretched beyond its comfort zone. Consider Seneca, who, despite being Rome's leading intellectual, would spend hours discussing philosophy with his illiterate gardener, not to teach but to learn. He understood that expertise in one area means nothing in another, and humility is the bridge between them. here's the twist: the beginner's mind isn't just for new skills. It's a lens you can turn on familiar terrain, your job, relationships, even your morning routine. Imagine approaching your workday not as a seasoned pro on autopilot, but as someone seeing it for the first time. What assumptions have you stopped questioning? What obvious solutions might actually be blind spots? The Japanese call this shoshin, a Zen concept the Stoics would have applauded, carrying the openness of a beginner even after mastery. So here's your challenge. What can you approach with fresh eyes today? Maybe it's a conversation with your partner where you listen as if hearing their stories for the first time. Or a task you've done 1,000 times: folding laundry, answering emails, where you ask, is there a better way? The goal isn't to dismiss your experience, but to prevent it from hardening into dogma. Because when you trade "I know" for "I wonder," anxiety loses its grip. After all, you can't fear failure when you've redefined the game. The only true mistake isn't falling, it's refusing to get up and try again with new eyes. When does prep become procrastination? There's a fine line between laying groundwork and hiding behind it, a line the Stoics knew well. Epictetus cut through the illusion with characteristic bluntness. If you want to be a writer, write. Not plan to write, not research writing, but write. Action, he taught, isn't just the destination, it's the antidote to fear. Think of standing at the edge of a cold pool. You can test the water with your toe, debate the temperature, or obsess over the perfect dive technique, but none of that compares to the electrifying moment you finally jump in. The shock fades fast, replaced by the exhilaration of being exactly where you feared to go. Consider the entrepreneur who spends months perfecting a business plan but hesitates to launch. Or the artist who buys every brush and tutorial yet avoids the blank canvas. Preparation feels safe because it's a simulacrum of progress, like rearranging deck chairs instead of sailing. The Stoics recognized this trap. Planning gives the illusion of control, while action requires surrendering to the messy reality of trial and error. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, not define be." Here's the paradox: imperfect action often teaches more than perfect planning. A novelist's first draft isn't a failure, it's a compass revealing what the story truly needs. A chef's botched dish highlights flavors that theories never could. The ancient Greeks had a word for this: praxis, the cycle of doing, reflecting, and improving. It's why Epictetus mocked students who treated philosophy like a spectator sport. You don't build strength by watching others lift weights. So here's your challenge: what's one step you're overthinking? Maybe it's sending that pitch before you've polished every syllable, or having the hard conversation without rehearsing every possible rebuttal. Try this: set a timer for 5 minutes and do the thing badly. Write a terrible first paragraph, sketch a clumsy prototype. You'll discover two truths. First, the monster of imperfection shrinks when confronted. Second, momentum builds its own wisdom. The Stoics didn't worship action for its own sake. They revered it as the forge where fear melts into freedom. And in that furnace, you'll find something unexpected. The very thing you feared to start becomes the ground beneath your feet. Your darkest moment isn't unique, and that's the most comforting truth you'll ever hear. Marcus Aurelius scribbled this revelation in his journal: "What injures the hive injures the bee." He wasn't just waxing poetic about nature, he was pointing to a fundamental Stoic truth: your pain isn't personal, it's human. That shame you carry after a failure, the loneliness that creeps in during setbacks, they're not proof you're broken, they're proof you're alive in a shared experience stretching back to the first person who ever tried and fell short. Consider the last time you bombed a presentation. The heat in your cheeks, the pit in your stomach. It felt isolating, didn't it? Now imagine an auditorium filled with every person who's ever stumbled over their words in front of a crowd. The room would overflow. That's the common humanity lens, zooming out from why me to of course me, just like everyone else. The Stoics didn't normalize suffering to minimize it. They did so to disarm its power to make you feel like an outlier. When you realize your struggles are part of the human operating system, you stop fighting them and start learning from them. Take rejection. Whether it's a romantic brush off or a declined job application, the sting feels intensely personal. But shift the angle. Right now, as you read this, thousands worldwide are nursing identical wounds, the aspiring actor checking another no in their inbox, the single parent swiping left on yet another dead-end match. Your pain isn't special, and that's the gift, because when you ask who else feels this way right now, you don't just find company, you find context. Marcus didn't journal about his imperial struggles to wallow. He did it to remember that even emperors wrestle with the same fears as cobblers and farmers. Here's how to practice this today. When shame whispers you're the only one, counter with data. Failed a test. Libraries are full of people who have retaken classes. Fumbled a relationship. Every love song ever written proves you're in crowded company. The Stoics didn't deny hardship. They reframed it as the price of admission to a club where everyone belongs. Because here's the secret no one tells you. The things you're most afraid to admit are usually the ones that would make others sigh. Oh, thank God, you too. And in that collective sigh, you'll find something stronger than solace. You'll find solidarity. When does more become less? Seneca saw the trap 2,000 years ago. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. That's the paradox of the enough threshold, the invisible line where pursuit turns into prison. Imagine filling a glass to the brim, then keep pouring. What was once abundance becomes spillage, then waste, then a slippery mess. The Stoics weren't against ambition. They warned against letting the hunger for more blind you to what you already hold. Take modern finance. We chase six-figure salaries, then 7, as if happiness lives in the next 0. But consider the entrepreneur who voluntarily caps her income at a point where her needs are met, her family secure, and her time protected. That ceiling isn't a limit, it's liberation. By declaring enough, she trades the hamster wheel of accumulation for the open field of meaningful work. The Stoics called this autarkeia, self-sufficiency measured not by what you own, but by what you no longer need to own. Now look beyond money. What about approval? How many likes, compliments, or promotions would finally satisfy that ache for validation? The answer, as Seneca knew, is none, because the hunger isn't in the world, it's in how we relate to it. Marcus Aurelius could have demanded endless victories as emperor. Instead, he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life, not nothing, just very little consciously chosen." Here's the litmus test. What's one area where you're mistaking extra for essential? Maybe it's the wardrobe full of clothes you rarely wear, the inbox choked with unread newsletters, or the calendar packed with obligations that drain more than they give. Try this. Pick one category and set a bold line. Enough shoes is when every pair gets worn monthly. Enough work emails is when the urgent ones are handled. Enough social media is when it stops adding energy and starts subtracting. The magic happens when you realize enough isn't a finish line, it's a breathing space. Like a hiker dropping an overpacked bag, you'll feel lighter, freer, more alive to the view, because the Stoics understood a truth we often forget. The richest life isn't the one that holds the most, but the one that needs the least to feel full. And that's a threshold worth crossing. How did you live today? Not what did you accomplish or how much you checked off your list, but how closely did your actions align with who you aspire to be. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who turned hardship into wisdom, insisted his students end each day with this ruthless audit. Say to yourself at bedtime, what bad habit did I correct today? How am I improved? What temptations resisted? Notice what's missing. No tally of productivity, no scorecard of external wins, just a quiet reckoning with the only metric that truly matters: your character. Picture this: you're lying in bed, replaying the day. That moment you snapped at your partner over spilled coffee, was that the response of someone practicing patience? The email you sent cutting corners on a project, did that reflect your standard of excellence? The Stoics weren't grading on a curve. Their nightly review was a mirror held up without flinching, not to shame but to sharpen. Seneca described it as sifting the day's dust for gold, as separating what served your growth from what diluted it. Here's how to practice this without self-flagellation. First, name one undeniable win. Maybe you listened deeply when a colleague vented instead of waiting to speak, or you chose the salad over the third slice of pizza, honoring your body's needs. No victory is too small to count. Then, identify one growth area, not a failure, but a pivot point. Perhaps you avoided a difficult conversation or scrolled mindlessly when you promised to read. The key is specificity. I was lazy becomes I postponed my workout for trivial tasks. Now comes the alchemy: transform observation into intention. That postponed workout, tomorrow it happens before breakfast. The snapped comment, you'll pause for 3 breaths before reacting. Epictetus didn't just diagnose, he prescribed. Progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily. Your evening review isn't a courtroom, it's a workshop where you recalibrate your compass. So tonight, as the day's noise fades, ask yourself 2 questions. Where did I honor my best self today? And where did I glimpse the next version waiting to emerge? Then close the ledger with this Stoic reminder: the sun will rise on a fresh page, and this time you'll write it with wiser hands. Imagine standing at the edge of a storm with an umbrella in one hand and unshakable calm in the other. That's what these 35 Stoic habits offer, not a promise to stop the rain, but the tools to walk through it without drowning. From the morning rituals that anchor your day to the mental rehearsals that disarm fear, each practice is a thread in a larger tapestry of resilience. Piece by piece, they transform emotional overwhelm from a tyrant into a teacher. Marcus Aurelius, who faced wars and plagues with the same journal in hand, put it plainly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's the heart of Stoicism. Peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the presence of self-mastery. Think of these habits as a toolbox. Some, like negative visualization, are crowbars prying gratitude from life's ordinary moments. Others, like voluntary discomfort, are sandpaper roughing up your comfort zone so you grip reality tighter. They don't all need to be used at once. Even mastering one, say, pausing before reacting or reframing obstacles as opportunities, can reroute your entire relationship with stress. The Stoics weren't building a fortress against emotion, they were crafting a compass to navigate it. Now here's your challenge: which habit will you test drive this week? Maybe it's asking yourself, will this matter in 5 years when petty frustrations arise? Or perhaps it's dedicating 5 morning minutes to journaling like Marcus, aligning your thoughts before the world pulls them apart. Progress doesn't demand perfection, just a single, intentional step. As you close this video, carry forward this truth: the storm around you never stops, but the stillness within that grows louder with every habit you practice. If these lessons resonated, consider subscribing. We're just scratching the surface of Stoic wisdom. And remember what the philosopher King wrote on his last night alive. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Your toolkit is ready. The first move is